Having looked through the sort of viewing history on my channel, it seems to me that a lot of people are mainly interested in equalization issues, and particularly how to use Hubble Harmonic Balancer to its most effective capabilities. And fundamentally, to actually understand how to do that, you really need to have a solid grasp on the concept of masking in human hearing, which I think a lot of people don't really understand particularly well. They might have a vague understanding of it, but in terms of quantitative understanding, not particularly. Rather than actually go through the complete details of human hearing and the mechanics of it, the inner ear, I'll just quickly gloss over the fact that what typically happens is sound will come in through your outer ear, down the ear canal into the inner ear via the anvil and hammer, I think it's called, which is attached to the eardrum. So that basically turns the acoustic input into acoustic input in the inner ear, which is the cochlear part, which has a whole bunch of hair cells that are all responding at different resonant frequencies, basically, which is what gives you your ability to pick out pitch and hear different tones across the full spectrum. And according to my Google search, I think there's, if you look at it, assuming that the reported information is accurate, there's within the cochlea around about 2,000 odd hair cells spread across that resonate across the bandwidth, and each of those hair cells actually turns that acoustic or mechanical vibration of the hair cell into a nerve impulse that gets sent to your brain. It's connected to your brain, and then your brain interprets what is going on. But the whole concept of why masking occurs is because those hair cells have a finite frequency response, or a finite bandwidth. They respond over a band of frequencies. So if you have two tones close to one another, they can then excite the same, potentially they can excite the same hair cell. So then it becomes an ambiguity to the brain to actually decide, am I hearing two tones or is this just one tone? Because they're both exciting the same thing. And that also gives rise to the concept of, what do you call it? Dissonance, basically. The dirtiness of a tone or two tones played close together creates a beat in the amplitude, and that amplitude is beat in the amplitude is translated to sort of beat related stimuli sent to the brain. So that gives you the dirtiness of it. But to better actually understand, without going into theoretical detail, how masking crops up, I thought it appropriate to give a simple demonstration of it. And to do that, it's quite a while ago now, probably well over a year, I think, but I just haven't got around to making this video. I created a HTML5 application which can actually physically demonstrate the concept of masking, which I shall attempt to demonstrate right now. So here is my HTML masking HTML5 masking demonstration application. Basically what I have here is a graphical depiction of this vertical line here is going to be our reference tone, which I haven't got switched on at the moment, or the masking frequency. Currently set to approximately 440 Hertz, so what's that, A2 or something like that in the musical scale. Then I have this masked frequency which I can adjust, and if you are a keen listener you should actually be able to hear this tone in the background, but it's right down low because it's -59. So you see, so like on its own you can clearly hear it, no problem, right down to the 59. If you've got headphones on you should be able to hear it, no problem. But now if I introduce the masking tone, suddenly you can't hear it anymore. So the idea here is we want to, I'll just turn that off to make it easier to listen to, because it's rather irritating to listen to that for a long time. But the idea here is we want to find a masked level that we can actually hear that tone while this masking frequency is playing. And that is then a representation of our masking threshold, and then I can actually plot the point on the graph by pressing this plot button. And as a general guide, well, yeah, you can actually demonstrate this for yourself because this is a public website. This is on my Harbel app. If you just follow this URL up here, so it's harbel.com/apps/ M masking D demo / it'll bring up this web app and you'll be able to try it out for yourself. But my general recommendation on doing this is don't spend an inordinate amount of time trying to actually find the exact level where you can hear it, because you can spend hours and get particularly frustrated and fatigued by it, and it's not really representative of how things will happen when you're listening to music. You want to just do it in a relatively quick and easy fashion, because that would correspond roughly to how you're going to be interpreting music as it flies by, because you won't be able to like put it on replay and try and pick out the details, because they'll be there and gone, because the musical content is ephemeral. So just do it as quickly as possible and I'll give you the most accurate representation of what your masking threshold behavior is like. The other recommendation as far as doing this sort of plot is start at the extremities and work backwards is the best approach, because well, you'll see when you actually start doing the plot, because the closer you actually get to the masking tone, the more degraded your threshold of hearing becomes. So if you start at this point and find the masking point and then adjust the frequency down, you won't be able to hear that tone anymore, because it'll be masked out, and then you'll have to bring this up. So it just makes the whole process easier if you start from high and move backwards, or conversely start from low and move upwards. And we'll have to do both, because there's different behavior on the top side and the bottom side, which you'll see. So if I start with this, I can, without the tone on, I can definitely hear that. If I turn it on, I can't really hear that. So now I'll raise the level until I can clearly hear it. I won't move the slider particularly fast, but I think I just heard it there. So that's a plot point there. Now you see, as I drop that frequency, at some point I can't hear it anymore. So now I'll raise this again. think I can pretty much hear it there. Plot that. I think it's gone now. I can't really hear it. I think I can start to hear it there. Somewhere around there. I think it's somewhere around there. I'm going the wrong way. Let's get pretty close. The closer you get, the harder it becomes to discern. But it's around about that 20 dB. It's an interesting sort of drop there for some reason. I'm not sure why. It's probably a harmonic related thing. Let's put it about 460 and then try and get a beat going. There you can start hearing the beat starting fluttering. Again, it's around about the minus 20 dB. So apart from this outlier, I'm not sure why that dropped down there. I'll just turn this off for a second. The general behavior is you've got around about 20 dB between the masking tone and any tone around it. Anything that's below 20 dB down in close proximity with that frequency becomes masked. You can't hear it. Stays pretty much that level within, I guess that's about half an octave or so. And then it starts falling at that sort of a rate. Now we'll try going below and see what happens. So again, like I said, I want to start at a low tone. Let's start at about, say, I don't know. Let's start at 100 Hertz. The other thing that'll happen, because this is pretty low in frequency, you'll start brushing up against threshold of hearing issues because we don't hear low frequencies very well. So I think I can sort of hear it there. Now introduce the masking tone. I think I can pretty clearly hear it there, so I'll say that. So you see, it's sort of dropped down. That's probably because of threshold of hearing issues, because if you remember, if you've seen a threshold of hearing curve typically with a Fletcher-Munson loudness plot, it's pretty poor at low frequencies, so that's what this drop is caused by. So this isn't really a masking effect, that's a threshold of hearing. This is more likely a masking effect. pretty much the same. I think I've lost it there. Oh, I went past my reference tone. So again, you can see you've got on the lower side, you've got the minus 20 dB in close proximity, but then below that it falls away rapidly, whereas above it doesn't. Now the supposed theoretical reason for why this occurs is because the entire mechanics of the inner ear has non-linearity in it. So any sound that actually gets transmitted through to the inner ear and to the hair cells will have harmonics added. So even though you've got a pure tone here, then you'll have harmonic distortion components in here. And each of those in itself acts like an independent source like this, which creates the ability to mask well beyond the fundamental tone. So that's why above, the masking threshold is quite high for a wide span of frequencies, whereas below, because you don't have subharmonics being generated via the nonlinearity, that doesn't occur. So that is fundamentally the key to understanding how you need to equalize things and what you need to pay attention to. So the key takeaway is, if you've got a loud tone at one point in your spectrum, you need to look principally above that tone for potential holes, because that will create a masking situation, a potential masking situation. So to continue on with a simple example of what I actually mean using this whiteboard. Let's say we've got our spectrum here, you got your amplitude there, you got your frequency here. And let's say we've got, do I want to use, I'll just use this. Let's say we've got an average spectrum that maybe looks like that, and a peak spectrum that mirrors it. So what you've got to imagine here is you've got because this is the mean, the average corresponds to the mean basically of the entire spectrum. The peak is the maximum extent. So you can roughly imagine that if I drew a graph here, you would have some sort of distribution that corresponds to the amplitudes that live around that spectrum at this point. And now, and similarly down here. So what you want to think of is you've got this really high peak here, you've got this hole here. So okay, that means maybe I'll do it in a different color. Hopefully this thing works. Hopefully it hasn't dried out. So we're going to have a distribution around here as well. So there's the peak value. It's going to go up something like that, maybe. Geez, steady hand. It'll be some sort of log normal distribution. And given this is a decibel span, on a decibel scale, it's going to look as a normal distribution. So now if we use our theory, well, it's not even theory, it's actually measured. Our measured effect of the modified threshold levels due to exposure to this large peak, we can, so basically this is the loudest peak here. This is what's going to be causing most of the issue to start off. Well, it'll start masking. I don't know where you want to draw it from. Maybe I can take it from the mean, but basically if you take that down there, I'll take it from, say, about the 95th percentile or somewhere like that. So let's consider this our masking tone level. Then we can basically draw our, come down 20 dB. If this span is 20 dB, I'm not sure what it is, but let's say for argument's sake this is 20 dB. So that means our masking threshold is going to start there, and it's going to go down something like that. And it's probably going to go down something like that on the low end, but we won't worry about the low end because it doesn't really have much influence. Oh, my microphone's a bit muted behind me. So if you now look at that, if you now project, this is our masking threshold generated by the content here, and if you look at the effect that it has on this distribution, it means potentially all this area here at some time or other is open to being masked. Now if we re-equalize that, so instead of leaving the spectrum down there, we now equalize it so it sits up here and up here. That shifts this entire distribution up, so that now sits around here like so. And now instead of having, well, that's about 60% masking, instead of 60% of our distribution being masked, now it's just this bit. It's just this tiny bit here. So it's gone from about potentially 60% down to, in our second case, probably, I don't know, 15%, something like that. So that's the effect of equalization. Re-equalizing this to make this spectrum more level makes, or casting a shadow there, I didn't notice, reduces the amount of masking, basically because it's shifting a large proportion of the content above the masking threshold. So if you think about it, what would be the ideal spectrum shape to remove masking? Well, in terms of, even though, because you still get some effective masking below the threshold as well as above the threshold, obviously the optimum spectrum would be flat in a pink scale. So that's nominally what you aim for, a relatively flat thing. But you potentially want to introduce like a particular slope or whatever, to introduce a certain degree of masking, because that certain degree of masking then alters the apparent color of the sound. So you're aiming for a particular sound. So you'll have a particular slope governing what your overall spectrum is going to look like. But that's essentially why whenever you see a spectrum like this which has deep holes in it, you have to consider, do I want to leave that hole, or do I want to readjust it to level it out somewhat to reduce the degree to which the content in this space is going to be masked by what's below it. And it's always what's below it that you need to worry about more so than what's above it. For content above it to present a major masking issue, it has to be substantially loud. So, like, it's only going to be an issue if you have something like this. In this case, you could say this is going to have a particular masking impact in this area. But this sort of circumstance doesn't really occur very often, except for perhaps the very base end when you're dealing with things like what the level of the kick bass is relative to the bass guitar and things like that. But it's predominantly what's above the peak that you need to be concerned about. Anyway, that's pretty much it.